A simple woman denied boarding. First class. Security called. Humiliation mounted. Then she made one call, to her billionaire husband, Edward. They're refusing to let me board. Faces paled the moment she handed the phone to the manager. Remove her number? Edward's voice boomed through the line. I'm removing all of you from your jobs. Grace Wellington walked through JFK Airport with the calm confidence of someone who had been traveling her whole life. Unlike the business travelers rushing by in designer suits and polished leather shoes, Grace chose comfort over flash. Today, she wore a simple black sweater with soft patterns, dark jeans, and practical walking shoes. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a no-nonsense ponytail, and the only jewelry she wore was a thin gold wedding band. The terminal buzzed with the usual morning rush. First-class passengers queued at priority check-in, while economy lines stretched longer nearby. Overhead digital boards blinked with global departure times. The air was rich with the scent of cinnamon and fresh coffee from nearby cafes. Grace stepped up to the Atlantic Airways first-class counter, ticket in hand. She'd been looking forward to this trip for weeks. Her husband, Edward, was already in San Francisco finalizing a major business deal, and she was flying out to join him for a long-overdue vacation, their first in nearly a year. Next passenger, please, called the attendant, a woman in her mid-30s dressed in a crisp blue uniform with flawless makeup. Her name tag read Veronica Palmer. Grace stepped forward and politely handed over her ticket and ID. Good morning. Flight 177 to San Francisco, please. Veronica's eyes lingered on Grace's comfortable attire, her expression shifting to barely veiled skepticism. She studied the first-class ticket, her voice edged with doubt. And how did you obtain this ticket, ma'am? Grace raised an eyebrow. My husband booked it for me. I see. Veronica typed into her computer, her acrylic nails clicking loudly on the keys. There seems to be an issue with your reservation. It's a first-class ticket, but the system isn't showing the proper coding. Grace kept her cool. There shouldn't be any issue. My husband confirmed everything yesterday. Veronica's smile tightened. Well, there is clearly a problem. Do you have the credit card used for purchase? No. My husband used his corporate account. Is something wrong? Veronica gave a rehearsed nod. We have strict protocols for first-class travel. Perhaps there was a mix-up with the booking. Grace felt a flicker of irritation. There's no mix-up. I have a confirmed first-class ticket, right here. Two sharply dressed businessmen behind her exchanged glances, their expensive watches catching the overhead lights. They were now listening intently. Veronica leaned in, lowering her voice. Our first-class experience is reserved for premium customers. We have standards to maintain. Grace's tone didn't waver. Excuse me. I can offer you a seat in economy, Veronica said, as if doing her a great favor. Same destination. Different seating arrangement. Grace stood taller. That won't be necessary. My ticket is for first class, and that's where I'll be sitting. Veronica's fake politeness dropped. Ma'am, I don't appreciate your tone. Perhaps you'd like to speak with my supervisor. Yes, I would, Grace replied, voice calm and unwavering. Without breaking eye contact, Veronica picked up the phone. Richard, we have a situation at counter 3. Can you come over? She hung up with a faint smirk. Mr. Hargrove will be with you shortly. Grace nodded and checked her phone. The flight wasn't for another 2 hours, but she knew how quickly these confrontations could spiral. Behind her, the line grew longer, and murmurs rose as people began noticing the brewing drama. Within minutes, Richard Hargrove arrived. His polished shoes clicked authoritatively across the floor. A tall man in his 50s, dressed in a sharp navy suit with a golden pin on his lapel, radiated corporate power. What's the issue here, Veronica? He asked in a measured tone. I can answer that. Grace interjected before Veronica could respond. There's no issue with my ticket, sir. Your colleague just seems to think I don't belong in first class. Hargrove's eyes flicked to her ticket, then slowly traveled down to her casual outfit. There was the faintest shift in his expression, subtle but telling. Mrs., he began. Wellington, Grace supplied. Grace Wellington. He nodded, putting on a practiced corporate smile. Mrs. Wellington, I understand your frustration, but we do have certain protocols in place. Veronica was just following procedure. And what sort of procedure requires interrogating someone with a valid ticket? Grace asked coolly. Hargrove leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. We sometimes deal with irregularities in our premium services. Individuals trying to upgrade without authorization or using tickets obtained through unconventional means. Grace's patience was rapidly thinning. Are you suggesting I stole this ticket? Not at all, Hargrove backpedaled smoothly. Perhaps a system error. These things happen. A small crowd had now gathered. The two businessmen behind Grace were still watching with interest, whispering amongst themselves. I've been standing here for 15 minutes, Grace said sharply. Can you please just verify my reservation and let me go to my gate? Hargrove exchanged a glance with Veronica, who gave him a slight tilt of her head. I'm afraid we'll need additional verification for this ticket, Hargrove said at last. Perhaps a call to your husband to confirm the booking? Grace stared at him. This is ridiculous. The ticket is legitimate. The reservation is confirmed. What more do you need? Hargrove's pleasant tone took on a sharper edge. Mrs. Wellington, I'm trying to be accommodating, but your attitude isn't helping. If you can't provide additional verification, I'll have to ask you to step aside and let other passengers through. Grace didn't budge. I'm not moving until you honor my ticket. Hargrove sighed, long and theatrical. Security, he called, motioning toward a nearby officer. A uniformed man, Officer Miller, his badge red, approached with casual authority, one hand resting near his belt. Is there a problem here? He asked, his gaze already settling on Grace as the likely troublemaker. This passenger is refusing to comply with our verification protocols and is blocking the line, Hargrove explained smoothly. We may need to escort her to the main terminal area. Grace felt her cheeks flush with frustration, but her voice remained calm. I have a valid first-class ticket. They're refusing to honor it because of how I'm dressed. Officer Miller's face stayed unreadable. Ma'am, if the airline staff has asked for additional verification. This is discrimination, Grace interrupted firmly. A few onlookers nodded in silent agreement. Hargrove's smile turned cold. That's a serious accusation, Mrs. Wellington. Perhaps you'd prefer to speak with our customer relations team after your flight. For now, I'll have to ask you to either step aside or accept an economy seat. Grace glanced from Hargrove to Officer Miller, then to the increasingly impatient line behind her. The public humiliation was no accident. It was a message. First class was only for those who looked the part. Fine, she said, pulling out her phone. Let me make a call. Making a call won't change our policy, Mrs. Wellington, Hargrove replied condescendingly. But feel free, if it makes you feel better. Grace didn't answer. She stepped away, phone in hand, as Veronica chirped. I can help whoever's next. Her voice suddenly sweet and professional as the next passenger stepped up. Officer Miller lingered nearby, watching her like she might cause a scene. Grace scrolled through her contacts and tapped a name. After 2 rings, a crisp female voice answered. Mrs. Wellington, good morning. Rebecca, I need to speak with Edward, Grace said quietly but firmly. Of course. One moment, he's just finishing a call. Hargrove glanced over again, a smug smirk pulling at his lips. Clearly, he thought she was just putting on a show. Then, Grace, came Edward's voice, calm and warm. Is everything okay? Aren't you boarding by now? That's why I'm calling, Grace said, turning slightly to shield her voice. The airline is refusing to honor my first-class ticket. They're demanding more verification or telling me to take an economy seat. There was a brief silence. Did you tell them who you are? Edward asked, his tone shifting. No, and I shouldn't have to. The ticket is valid, Edward. Of course it is. There was controlled fury behind his voice. Put me on speaker. That's not necessary. Grace. That tone. The one she'd heard in boardrooms where billion-dollar decisions were made. The one that silenced entire rooms. With a quiet sigh, she tapped speaker mode. You're on speaker, she said. Edward's voice came through clear and commanding. Who am I speaking with? Hargrove, suddenly more alert, stepped forward. This is Richard. This is Hargrove, supervisor at Atlantic Airways, JFK. And you are? Edward Sinclair, CEO of Sinclair Global Investments and majority shareholder of Pinnacle Holdings. If I'm not mistaken, we acquired controlling interest in your parent company last year. Hargrove's face turned ghostly pale. Veronica, mid-check-in with another passenger, froze like a statue. Even Officer Miller took a quiet step back. Mr. Sinclair, sir, Hargrove stuttered. There seems to have been some sort of misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Edward interrupted, his tone like steel. My wife presented a valid first-class ticket, and you chose to humiliate her because she wasn't wearing designer clothes. Is that correct? The entire terminal seemed to pause. Travelers had stopped pretending not to eavesdrop. Every eye turned toward the unfolding scene. Sir, we follow standard protocols. Don't insult me with protocols, Mr. Hargrove, Edward cut in sharply. I fly over 200,000 miles a year with your airline. I know your procedures inside out. This isn't protocol, it's blatant discrimination. A woman behind the counter whispered, wide-eyed. Did he just say Sinclair? As in Sinclair Global. Hargrove was now visibly sweating. Mr. Sinclair, please allow me to personally escort Mrs. Wellington to the first-class lounge right away. We value your business tremendously. What I value, Edward said, voice low and dangerous, is respect. Something your team failed to show my wife. Now, I want your regional director. Not later. Not tomorrow. Now. Hargrove swallowed hard. Sir, Miss Thompson isn't on site, but I'll get her immediately. He was already tapping furiously on his phone, panic setting in. Good, Edward replied. And while we wait, Grace, I want you to tell me everything that happened. Grace met Hargrove's panicked eyes with quiet confidence. As soon as I handed over my ticket, she began, Veronica questioned how I got it. She implied I didn't look the part for first class. When I refused to downgrade to economy, Mr. Hargrove called security and threatened to have me removed. Veronica had stopped checking in passengers altogether. Her face was pale. Nearby staff were whispering, a young employee furiously typing on a tablet. I see, Edward said, his voice chillingly calm. Mr. Hargrove, do you deny any of this? Sir, it was a miscommunication during the verification process. Answer the question, Edward snapped. Did you, or did you not, judge my wife based on her appearance and try to deny the seat I personally booked for her? The silence that followed was deafening. Even Officer Miller, now awkwardly distant, seemed fascinated by a speck on the wall. Mr. Sinclair, Hargrove finally muttered, I sincerely apologize. Our staff receives extensive customer service training. This does not reflect our values. At that moment, a woman in her 60s approached quickly from the offices, her expression all business. Her name tag read Victoria Thompson, Regional Director. Miss Thompson is here, Hargrove announced, clearly relieved. She gently took the phone from his hand. Mr. Sinclair, this is Victoria Thompson. I just received the alert and came immediately. Please accept my deepest apologies for what happened. I'm listening, Edward said. We will thoroughly investigate this incident. In the meantime, Mrs. Wellington will receive our highest level of service. I would like to personally escort her to the Celestial Lounge and ensure she boards with priority. Not good enough, Edward replied firmly. I want immediate disciplinary action against those involved. Thompson nodded, even though he couldn't see it. Of course, sir. Mr. Hargrove and Miss Palmer will be placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation, effective immediately. A gasp escaped Veronica. Hargrove's face twisted in disbelief. But Victoria, he began. She silenced him with a single look, then turned back to the phone. Mr. Sinclair, our CEO will also call you directly this afternoon to discuss how we can make this right. As chaos swirled around her, Grace stood tall, silent, watching the power of one call, and the truth shift everything. The very people who had been eager to humiliate her moments ago were now scrambling to appease her husband. Grace Edward turned to speak directly to her. Are you comfortable with this arrangement for now? He asked. Grace paused for a moment, considering her response. Yes, but I would like something else as well. Name it, Thompson said without hesitation. A written apology addressed to every passenger who witnessed this incident, acknowledging the discrimination and detailing the steps your airline is taking to prevent it in the future, Grace replied firmly. Thompson blinked in surprise, but quickly regained her composure. Of course, Mrs. Wellington. We'll arrange that immediately. A murmur of approval spread through the crowd, and an elderly man nearby gave Grace a subtle nod of respect. My wife's wishes will be followed precisely, Edward confirmed. And Miss Thompson, he added, I'll expect that call from your CEO. Don't disappoint me twice today. Absolutely, sir, Thompson assured him. Mrs. Wellington will be treated with the utmost respect. As Thompson ended the call, the atmosphere in the terminal shifted. The onlookers now regarded Grace Wellington not as an object of curiosity, but as someone of influence and power. Victoria Thompson personally escorted Grace past the security checkpoint, apologizing profusely with every step. Behind them, Hargrove and Veronica were being led to the administrative offices, their faces expressionless with shock. The Celestial Lounge is just ahead, Mrs. Wellington, Thompson said, gesturing toward a discreet door with frosted glass. I've informed the staff of your arrival. Anything you wish will be provided immediately." Grace nodded but remained silent. The satisfaction of seeing justice served was overshadowed by the realization that it wasn't truly her they were responding to. It was Edward's name, money, and power. As they entered the exclusive lounge, all conversations halted momentarily, and heads turned in their direction. The news had clearly spread quickly. Thompson ushered Grace to a private seating area where a server immediately appeared. "Mrs. Wellington, welcome to the Celestial Lounge. My name is Michael, and I'll personally attend to your needs today. Can I bring you something to drink?" "Just water, thank you," Grace replied. After the server left, Thompson lowered her voice. "Mrs. Wellington, I want to assure you personally that what happened today is being addressed at the highest levels. By the time you land in San Francisco, significant changes will be in place." Grace met her gaze with calm determination. "This isn't about me, Miss Thompson. It's about a culture that judges people based on their appearance. How many others without billionaire husbands have your staff treated this way?" Thompson shifted uncomfortably, clearly feeling the weight of Grace's words. "Your point is well taken. I promise you, this will lead to a thorough review of our practices." As Thompson excused herself to make further arrangements, Grace's phone buzzed with a text from Edward. "How are you really feeling?" She smiled and typed back, "Like I just witnessed a corporate earthquake. You should have seen their faces." His response came swiftly. "I'd rather see yours in about 6 hours." "Looking forward to it," she replied. Grace settled into the plush chair, observing the lounge around her. The same first-class passengers who might have judged her earlier were now casting furtive, curious glances her way. A few were likely searching for information about Edward Sinclair's wife on their phones. Michael returned with her water, served in a crystal glass on a silver tray. "Mrs. Wellington, I've been informed that the captain would like to personally welcome you aboard when it's time for boarding. Is that acceptable?" Grace smiled politely. "That won't be necessary. I'd prefer to board like everyone else." "Of course," Michael replied, though his expression suggested that such a request was unusual for a VIP. As Grace sipped her water, she reflected on the events of the morning. The discrimination had been painful, but the swift response had offered a glimmer of hope. Perhaps some good would come of it, not just for her, but for others who didn't have the Sinclair name to protect them. 6 hours later, Grace's flight touched down at San Francisco International Airport. As the plane taxied to the gate, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to San Francisco. Local time is 2:14 p.m., with clear skies and a temperature of 72 degrees. We'd like to thank you for flying with Atlantic Airways today, especially Mrs. Grace Wellington Sinclair. It's been our honor to serve you." Several passengers turned to look at Grace, but she kept her gaze fixed on the window, pretending not to notice. The announcement was unnecessary, just another example of the airline going overboard to make amends. As she disembarked, the entire crew was lined up to bid her farewell, their smiles nearly too eager. At the jet bridge, Grace was surprised to find not just Edward waiting for her, but also James Hutchinson, the CEO of Atlantic Airways, looking both apologetic and anxious. "Mrs. Wellington," Hutchinson began, extending his hand, "I cannot express how deeply sorry I am about your experience this morning." Grace shook his hand briefly. "Mr. Hutchinson, I appreciate your concern." Edward stepped forward, wrapping an arm around Grace's waist and kissing her cheek in both greeting and a statement to everyone watching. "James and I have had a productive conversation," Edward said. "Atlantic Airways will be implementing new training programs aimed at eliminating bias in customer service." Hutchinson nodded eagerly. "We're also revamping our complaint procedures and establishing an independent review board for discrimination claims." "And Hargrove and Veronica?" Grace asked. "Their employment has been terminated," Hutchinson confirmed, "effective immediately." As they made their way toward the exit, Edward whispered to Grace. He flew in personally when he heard what happened. Their stock dropped 3 points this morning after someone posted about the incident online. Grace shook her head. "All this because I wore jeans instead of designer clothes." Edward corrected her gently. "All this because they thought appearance determined worth. And you proved them wrong." Outside, a sleek black car awaited to whisk them away. As they settled into the back seat, Grace finally relaxed, leaning against Edward's shoulder. "You know what the strangest part is?" she mused. "If they had just treated me with basic respect, none of this would have happened." Edward squeezed her hand. "That's usually how it goes. The simplest courtesy costs nothing, but the lack of it can cost everything. Sometimes the most powerful people are the ones you'd never expect. Grace Wellington's story reminds us to look beyond appearances and treat everyone with dignity and respect. Have you ever been judged unfairly or witnessed someone being discriminated against? Share your experience in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice served, hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life tales of underestimated people who prove their worth in unexpected ways. Where are you watching from today? Let us know. Our community spans the globe, united by our appreciation for these powerful moments of truth. Remember, true class isn't about what you wear, it's about how you treat others. And with that, the story of Grace Wellington ended. Silent, but with all eyes now fixed on her, the unfolding scene a reminder that appearances can be deceiving.